For instance, if you go through most of the documents which you want to open, for instance, text would open in a notepad, but you want WordPad, you can right click, choose default and give. This all comes under extension of the system which will enhance your user friendliness with compared to OS. Then we have a new thing which is coming in is reach shared library. Now, what do you mean by reach shared library and thousands of APIs to work with? As I said, API, application programming interface. The basic logic is fairly simple. I create something today which is useful for my project, but I am also sharing it with the world because somebody can use it something better. Consider an example. Windows came all back long route, which started with the MS-DOS being the first one. No guys, it is not MS Dhoni, it is MS-DOS, Microsoft Disk Operating System. The system started, we worked with the GUI extension and created first Windows 3.1. Then there was no looking back, next was Windows 95. Then we started with this, mind you, I'm not talking about networking, otherwise there was Windows NT and several other things. I'm just talking about the commercial home user front. There was a 98 which was the most successful. FE got failed. They started with SE, became the most successful operating system, started with XP, going to Windows Millennium, or also known as Windows 2000, shifting to 7, then 8, and currently we are at 10. So let's make it simple. There are a lot of things developed by different users. All this, whatever we have developed, Microsoft is now sharing it with the remaining part of the world, giving them a prepared APIs which can be used to create their own application. See, people who has a bit background of .NET or C#, they would know we need to use Windows services for many of the operations. Java also does the same, although, but when it comes to using Windows services, there needs to be certain way, and that way is the API which we get. Along with this, obvious, for which Microsoft is famous, the GUI. Remember, many of it, there is always debate between the Linux and Windows. I am among these people who use Windows plenty but still loves Linux. I have two laptops working, one working with the Windows and another working with the Linux. If I compare both, I love both them equally, but Linux has an upper hand in the stability front. Most of the viruses will not get down Linux, but they will target the data over the Linux. On the other hand, when it comes to Microsoft, major attack is always on the operating system itself. So obvious, let's not get into argument about which is better, but yes, we have several other things which the biggest factor of Microsoft is and was the GUI. Linux being equally capable but not very well famous is the GUI front. Although in recent last 3 or 5 years, Linux has really come ahead with a beautiful GUI, but perhaps they were a bit too late because most of the world has started using Microsoft. So let's see, after knowing all these components, the most interesting thing would be the block diagram. And for the student guys, yes, in exam you are supposed to reproduce this. Or how? That is a good question. I would answer just as the practice. This is the entire architecture of Windows 7. So be very careful. Let's try to understand how things are going to be worked. Okay, as you can see up, what you can see is the user mode and the down is the protection mode. So let's see how things are going to be worked. The operating system would communicate with the hardware via the hardware abstraction layer, as we said. Hardware abstraction layer in turn would communicate with the kernel, and kernel has its own communication happening from the higher side. All the applications which we are talking about is up, the OS area is down, and the hardware goes below that. So all the communication from the application front goes to the OS, and from the OS goes to the hardware. How this is going to happen, let's try to understand in a very simple manner. Whatever calls made by anybody via their own system will reach to Win32 system. Now let's understand Windows 32 is the way they code it. You will also have Windows 64 to come into picture. This is a 32-bit, so they have said Win32 system. So that will go to Win32 whenever it is to be executed. It will come to executive. Executive has several things, right from IO manager to handle storage, network driver, disk, and so many other devices which you connected to. They have object manager, security reference, process manager, plus plug and play, virtual memory manager, and local procedure call facility. Now let's try to understand quickly what it's. Each of the file would be treated as an object by the object manager. Security reference and monitor would check into the security front whether you are allowed to make that call or not. The process manager will finally execute that process so that it can perform some operation. Plug and play manager, if you intend to have any external hardware which gets plugged into USB or any of the expansion slots, plug and play manager becomes active. Virtual memory to handle the memory. Windows 7, mind you, uses